Alright, it may be March and I may not have made a video in 4 months, but who cares? I want to talk about the top 10 games I played in 2018. Except, I didn't quite really play all that many games in 2018. I might have kind of only sort of played almost 10. Listen, I do my best to keep up with video games, to know about everything new that's coming out, stay up to date on the whole industry, but I just don't have the time to sit down and actually play a ton of games myself. Or to play games with others, as was the case with Persona 5, which I put almost 120 hours into in 2017, but in 2018 continued to sit on my shelf, unfinished, since my brother and I were going to try and finish it together, but never really found the time to share. So I guess Persona 5 remains my Game of the Year 2017, will most likely become my Game of the Year 2019 whenever I finish it, and then Persona 5R will be my Game of the Year for whatever year it comes out, and also whatever year I finally finish it. Anyway, either by sheer coincidence or because I'm just that savvy when it comes to buying games, the few games that I played last year were all pretty good and deserve to be talked about anyway. So, you know, this list will still at least be populated by quality titles, hopefully. Main thing is, since I still haven't finished several of these games, and I barely have enough titles to populate this list anyway, these won't be ranked 10 through 1 in order of quality. They're going to be ranked by how qualified am I to talk about this game based on how much of the game I have completed. Cross-referenced with, did it come out in 2018, and is this a remaster of one of my favorite games ever, so should I really rank it any higher than number 8, or am I just being disingenuous at that point? God of War is an honorable mention, not because it doesn't deserve to be in the top 10, because again, this isn't a top 10, it's just the games that I played, but it's an honorable mention because I didn't actually play it myself, I just watched the super mediocre coworkers play it. When the word cinematic gets thrown around with regards to games, people are usually talking about big, scripted, set-piece moments that will make you feel like you're playing a summer blockbuster action movie. I'd call God of War one of the most cinematic games I've ever seen, but not because of any bombast or explosiveness on its part. It's actually incredibly subdued compared to previous entries in the series. It has incredible camera work and lighting, fantastic performances from all of its actors, and a script that is actually extremely classy by the standards of ostensibly big, dramatic action games. I think that's the most shocking thing about this game, and a big part of what makes it so great. It's classy, and it's classy without sacrificing the gore, the blood, the larger-than-life battles, or the inherent silliness of its video game world and premise. God of War is video game. It's not perfect. I know some people are split on the combat, but so much of this game represents what I wish other games like this would aspire to, and I would have played it myself if I hadn't been too busy playing worse games on YouTube because I hate myself. But speaking of cinematic production and classy scripts, number 10 on my list is Red Dead Redemption 2. This came out in late 2018, and even though I've put a ton of time into it, I haven't even finished Chapter 2 because I've been too busy just wandering around, hunting game, and doing absolutely nothing. Much like God of War, Red Dead is a remarkably well-produced game, and I could actually feel myself being taken in by these characters and their world, as opposed to how repulsed I felt by Grand Theft Auto V's script. It seems like everyone on the planet other than me hates the slow animations, but personally, they just add to the charm of the game and contributed a great deal to making this relatively small open world actually feel like the vast reaches of the American Midwest. The only reason I haven't spent more time progressing the stories of the neediest outlaws of the 19th century is because I was so busy during fall of 2018 that sometimes it was just easier to hop on my horse and ride around the countryside for a while. This game is slow-paced, it's awkward to control, and Rockstar still needs to improve in so many basic areas of game design, but I guess in the end, their 100-hour work weeks and millions of dollars won out because I will literally just boot up this game to wander around for an hour and enjoy every second of it. Dragon Quest XI is not a game out to surprise you. Every fiber of its being is composed of cliches and tropes, but it carries about it such an effortless charm that you don't even care. The game has enough soul to execute extremely serious and sad scenes effectively, but it also has enough wit to keep things breezy and fun when it's time to move on. The only thing about this game that will surprise you is how much you'll find yourself caring about things that you called within minutes of the opening cutscene playing. This is in no small part thanks to, yet again, incredibly solid presentation. The English version of the game has voice acting, but retains the press X to advance through text boxes cutscenes that were present in the voiceless Japanese original. Somehow, even though the characters are, by design, tethered to a single spot whenever they're reading their lines, everything still feels dynamic and quick-witted. How the heck does this game have better editing and cinematography for its fight scenes than Kingdom Hearts 3? Your party members aren't exactly all-time greats for the genre, but there isn't a dud among them either. Every time I go to a new area, I always open the party talk options to see what my compadres have to say about the current state of affairs. So far, Veronica and Sylvando are the crown jewels of the cast. They're both full of sass, but keep that earnest and easygoing nature that is so critical to the game's overall tone. They don't come across as sarcastic or uninterested in what's going on, they just care in a different way than the rest of the cast. This is a game where a character says the words anti-mermaid agenda, and this prompt happens. What's not to like? I still haven't finished this one either, though. I've been kind of busy. I had just reached some all-girls school in the mountains where they care about metals or something, and there was a magic vine there. They let me watch old cutscenes, which made getting footage for this video a lot easier. Anyway, I'll finish it sometime, eventually. Speaking of incredibly long JRPGs, Final Fantasy XII is my favorite Final Fantasy. The Zodiac Age Remaster is officially the best version, and it's officially gonna be on Xbox One and Nintendo Switch soon, so play it! Despite a rocky development cycle and a fake main character manufactured by a misguided marketing department at the last minute, this game still comes through as an incredible achievement for JRPGs, and one of the last times that Square Enix managed to churn out a major release that felt truly modern in its time, until they just let Platinum make a game. What's also great about the Zodiac Age is that they finally managed to get out of their own way and acknowledge that this guy is not the main character. He's still in the game, yeah, but if you watch the story trailers or look at the drop-dead gorgeous promotional artwork for this new release of the game, finally, Her Royal Majesty Ashelia Banagin Dalmasca emerges from the shadows to claim her birthright. After some establishment preamble, Ash bursts onto the scene and the game starts setting up its take back the kingdom, overthrow the empire dominoes, but gracefully, the game has the wit and ingenuity to do some creative things and ask some interesting questions within that framework. Most of the Final Fantasy games are ripping off Star Wars in one way or another, and while the A New Hope parallels are strong with this one, Final Fantasy XII has some wrinkles that send its characters careening off in a new direction. The big one is that in this story, our princess isn't just out to destroy the Death Star. She's out to possibly, maybe, capture it for herself. This entire game is basically just Ash on a rogue cross-country mission with the only people crazy enough or loyal enough to follow her, trying to either dismantle or capture enough nuclear warheads to safely declare her nation's sovereignty. Her wild mad dash and the indecision over whether or not she should do the right thing or the easy thing is great, and it all plays out against a backdrop of a fully realized setting with fully realized nations and factions vying for power. Of all the Final Fantasy worlds, Ivalice is easily the most fully realized setting, and I love it. I guess I should talk about the gameplay. Remember when I said that I like Dragon Quest XI? Well, I was actually lying, because it has turn-based combat, the worst form of gameplay in all of video game history, created by the KGB to torture captured MI6 and CIA agents during the Cold War. Okay, jokes aside, I could talk about combat design in JRPGs for hours, so I'm gonna have to reel myself in here a little bit. The reason that so many people find turn-based combat so unengaging is because it so rarely demands the player to make interesting decisions. You spend resources to do extra damage to the enemy, or to heal yourself and protect yourself. From there, it's a DPS race with light resource management. That's it. Every time. What you're doing never changes throughout an entire game, and you almost never have to make interesting decisions. You know what people actually like about JRPGs? Even the people who say that they like turn-based combat in JRPGs, they actually like the menus. This stuff right here, this is where the decisions are made. This is where the players feel like they're having an impact on the game. They're essentially making all of the decisions that they'll make during combat right here, which means the battles are more or less just pop quizzes on material you've already studied before. So they aren't hard, but they are a waste of time, and you just want to get on with your life, but oh man, another pop quiz? We just had one a couple minutes ago! To be clear, I like these types of games, I just feel that the actual turn-based combat in most JRPGs is something you do in between the parts that you actually care about. There are, by my count, about 4 games that make the actual turn-based combat part of JRPG turn-based most combat fun. This is obviously just my personal opinion. And while Final Fantasy XII isn't among these 4 games, I would consider it to be adjacent to them. Final Fantasy XII is more or less the most honest JRPG I've ever played. It knows that all the important decision-making is in the menus, so it just gives you even more stuff to do in the menus by putting the fights in the menus too. You get to build AI routines for all your party members to take care of all the chump work during battles, so you only have to step in when it's time for an interesting or important decision. Final Fantasy XII doesn't exactly change the core design of JRPG combat, but it does make an honest attempt to examine the limitations and conventions of its own genre and to address them. So, yeah, it's on the list of games that I played in 2018, I guess. Look, I got my wisdom teeth taken out earlier this year, and I had to sit on a sofa holding a pack of ice to my face for hours on end. I didn't really have much to do, but I could play Final Fantasy XII with my one free hand, because all I had to do was navigate menus and then steer my characters around and watch them melt all of the bad guys. So that's cool. The fast forward feature in the Zodiac Age is also a godsend, and it makes this unquestionably the best version of the game, so play it! I swear it's good. Give it another chance if you dropped it years ago. Okay, I did play 10 games last year, right? God, there's gotta be something else that I could put on this. I'm about to slot in a time-wasting multiplayer shooter, aren't I? New World Interactive have made 3 fantastic online shooters: Insurgency, Day of Infamy, and Insurgency Sandstorm. Technically speaking, Day of Infamy was the one that I spent a decent amount of time actually playing last year, but that's just because I'm a stupid, belligerent, impossible man. I also lost most of the footage that I gathered from these games, so I borrowed some from the original trailers. Sorry. It's hard to quickly explain what makes these games stand out. They're hardcore multiplayer shooters where quote-unquote realism doesn't overtake fun. Time to kill is lightning fast, and it's extremely hard to be a one-man army, but it's also extremely hard to feel completely useless or lost on the battlefield. Everything is objective-based, so you're always alternating between pushing on positions and fortifying positions. The games are just designed in such a way that it is incredibly difficult for people to behave like complete morons. It is always intuitively clear what you should be doing to help your team and where the enemy will be. But I think the most genius thing about these games is the suppression mechanic. Bullets are usually 1 or 2 hit kills, but if there's a near miss and a bullet whizzes right past you, your vision blurs and your accuracy plummets. This is an incredible system for a lot of reasons, but one of the big ones is that it actually means you can hit someone without hitting them, and you also know when you're being shot at without actually being hit. If you're being suppressed, that's sort of a good thing because that's your cue to pull back and hide before you actually catch a bullet and die, but if you suppress an enemy, you're preventing them from putting fire onto your teammates. This means that playing support in a non-arcadey shooter without a medic is finally just as entertaining and important as playing any other role. Suppressive fire actually has a utility in a game where players don't fear for their lives in the way that real soldiers would. If you find a good spot and hide and put a ton of machine gun fire onto an enemy position, even if you don't kill a single person, it will at least mean you force them away from the windows or other exposed positions, which could provide your teammates with needed openings to push forward. It's genius! Sorry, I just appreciate this because I've never seen another game where suppressive fire actually really means anything on a mechanical level. Whatever, Insurgency and Day of Infamy are only on PC, but Insurgency Sandstorm is supposedly coming to consoles sometime later this year, so we'll see how that goes. Super Mario Odyssey came out in late 2017. I played it a lot in 2017, but I also watched my younger brother play it more than I probably played it myself. And then we beat it together at 1 a.m. in the morning on January 1st, 2018. So it qualifies for the list. I told you I didn't play many games last year. Not sure what I can really say about this game that hasn't already been said or that you'd care to hear. It's good. I was personally happy to see weird new characters in a Mario game again. I was kind of afraid that Miyamoto had banned those entirely and forever. Much like with Breath of the Wild, I really feel like this game has kicked the proverbial door wide open, and I'm very excited to see what comes next for this franchise. Assuming that they ever make another Mario game now that Bowser is running things. Okay, number 5 is cheating too. Just stick with me for like 2 seconds. Sea of Thieves. No, stick with me, I'm going somewhere with this. Sea of Thieves was a neat but fundamentally flawed concept that was really short on content. Definitely not a contender for best game of 2018. And you know what else wasn't a contender for best game of 2018? PUBG. Especially considering that 2018 was the year that PUBG slowly, ungracefully died a dishonorable death. But you know what else was even more responsible for PUBG's death than Fortnite? Black Ops 4 and its Blackout mode. Fortnite may have gotten a lot of traction, but for people who really enjoy PUBG, Fortnite just isn't PUBG. It doesn't offer anything even vaguely resembling the same experience. Blackout is basically PUBG, but with polished controls and the shooting of Call of Duty, and also,
It just works.
it has a good frame rate. You can actually hide in the grass since it renders properly. Basically, everyone with money and talent is now coming out to destroy PUBG, and Blackout just kind of happened to be the first person to get there. And you know what these three games have in common? I didn't play any of them in 2018. But I sure did watch a lot of entertaining people play them on YouTube. Now you may fairly be wondering why I said that I was giving God of 4 an honorable mention because I only watched it, but I'm still including this in my top 10 list. Well, it's quite simple. While you can obviously play PUBG or Blackout or whatever else solo and have yourself a good time, I'm also confident that I would get burnt out playing those types of games by myself. I know enough about myself and about what I want out of my games to know that I want to play these types of games with a team. Friends, people that I know and that I can communicate with and joke around and whatnot. A lot of the frustration that is inherent to these types of games is mitigated when you can actually communicate with friends to try and avert catastrophe, and laugh together when catastrophe inevitably strikes anyway. Two major problems with this model. Number one problem, I would need to have at least 3 friends, and number 2 problem, I would need to convince these 3 non-existent friends to all purchase the same game and hope that they maintained interest in it over time. Both of these are Herculean tasks that I simply wasn't up to in 2018. But watching other goofy groups of friends play these games on the internet was a really fantastic experience that took up just as much of my time last year as actually manually playing the average game did. Sea of Thieves may be kind of a garbage game, but it's the absolute perfect stage for idiots with microphones to screw around and have fun.
I'm Willie Two Legs, so called for having 2 legs.
Nice.
I'm the only one in me family that still has both feet.
The name's Peg Pecker.
So, yeah, watching other people play Sea of Thieves, PUBG, Blackout, and others, that's on my list. Because I didn't play 10 games last year. Alright, now we're getting to the big boys, games that I actually played to completion. There's no more room for jokes, no more space for memes, so strap yourselves in and don't be mad, please. Next up is Marvel's Spider-Man. I wish they'd given it a subtitle. I hate having to call it Marvel's Spider-Man. A big budget, extremely polished single-player game with decent sales numbers and that feels complete on its own despite having a decent chunk of DLC planned out ahead of time. Looping back to the theme that I was talking about before, despite the big business interests behind this game, it feels pretty classy. It's got tons of costumes and unlockables hidden within the game instead of being locked behind microtransactions, a story that actually takes its time when appropriate and cares almost as much about the day-to-day human lives of its characters as it does about their superhero shenanigans, which is not a luxury that the video game versions of superheroes are usually afforded. Solid voice and motion capture performances really sell all of these characters. Yuri Lowenthal deserves to be included in the Who Played Peter Parker Best discussion alongside the main live-action film actors. But all that being said, now that I have some distance from the game, I'm not sure how much of an impression it left on me. I liked it a lot, I'd recommend it to anyone who asked me about it, but I'm kind of hard-pressed to really talk about it now in a lot of detail. It could be because it was the first time that I ever played a game blind on stream and had to worry about a ticking clock and keeping my audience entertained as I went along, so that might have tainted my experience a little bit. Maybe I need to go back and replay it on my own time. I can remember pretty much everything that happened in the game. I remember all of the interesting and surprising moments. I liked all of these characters enough that I'm very excited to play a potential sequel, but it just doesn't seem to stick out in my brain quite as powerfully as some of its peers. It doesn't have the scope and drama of Spider-Man 2, and it doesn't have the grounded deep cuts of Homecoming's honesty and small stakes. As it stands, Marvel's Spider-Man sits somewhere on the spectrum between those two movies, and while that's certainly a good spectrum to be on in the first place, it does feel like it's trying to do a lot of things at the same time, and it isn't quite confident enough about any one of them to really lean into it, to construct an entire story around a really clean-cut central idea or tone. Still enjoyed the heck out of it though, still really liked all these characters as I said. Still enjoyed swinging around Manhattan, still buying the sequel whenever it comes out. It's a good game, just maybe not great. Or maybe I should say, maybe not spectacular? Ultimate? Superior? So remember earlier when I said there are 4 games with good JRPG turn-based combat? I lied, there are actually 4.25 games with good JRPG turn-based combat. This year, Toby Fox followed up Undertale with a demo for his next game, Deltarune, and it's got all the wit, all the charm, and all the carefully considered characters that you'd expect, and okay, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I've somehow overlooked it, but it doesn't seem like the really toxic parts of the Undertale fanbase have resurfaced in droves for this game, so hey, maybe you can actually get into Undertale without being harassed now. Deltarune adds several new wrinkles to Undertale's combat. Some of them are really smart and some of them are a bit cumbersome, but all of the changes are motivated by the same core focus that ran through the original game. See, Undertale and Deltarune both understand that people play RPGs for their stories and their characters, so instead of completely detaching the combat from those things, these games make characters and their writing a central part of the combat. Combat is less about resource management and damage output than it is about solving dialogue puzzles. These games also hold the distinction of being the only JRPG-styled combat systems where the enemy's turn is the most engaging part of combat, as opposed to the part where you can literally just put your controller down and go check the news, because it's more interesting. Deltarune pushes these concepts further by giving you a party of characters with distinct personalities, including a personality who is so distinct that you can't actually control her, and suddenly the combat becomes about managing an unruly teammate. There's little mini-games to play in fights, near misses during the bullet hell segments fill your mana. It's all pretty fantastic. With the announcement that this demo is coming to Switch and PC, and the promise that more is in the works, I hope that means that Toby has found a team he can work with and that more projects are on the horizon. I can't wait for more. Alright, I don't care if this is hyperbolic. Celeste is almost perfect. You can call it hyperbole, you can call it exaggeration, I don't care. I loved every second of this game, toe to tip. The music is amazing, the art style is gorgeous and never obscures the action, the controls are tight and responsive, and the game is full of all these intuitive new mechanics that come up with each level. The combination of unique stage hazards and your consistent, understandable moveset allow for so many creative ways to use your abilities that lead to tons of satisfying moments where you go, oh, duh, that's how you do it! The game is definitely difficult, but it never really feels unfair, especially during the main story missions. If the path forward is obscure, when you discover it, you'll kick yourself for being such a dummy and not noticing it before, and if you can see the path forward, it's just a matter of executing a perfect sequence of jumps and dashes to reach your goal, and it always feels like victory or failure is on you, which is exactly where you want it. Even the bonus levels, which I'm not nearly big enough of a man to have beaten all of these, even here, the challenges are fair. When you look at the screen, you rarely find yourself questioning what it is that you need to do to advance. Instead, you're just going, oh, I have to do that? Seriously? This game could have been a pure platforming adventure with no narrative accompaniment, and it still probably would have deserved all the praise that was dumped on its lap last year, but it also has a story, and it's even better for it. I don't know, maybe some people will find it preachy or too on the nose, but to those people, I say, shut up, you heartless bastards. I don't care if you don't like platformers or if you're scared off by what you've heard about the difficulty, just play Celeste, you cowards. Okay, we gotta be clear about something here. Celeste was the best game that I played last year. The #1 game on this list didn't even come out last year. But as I said before, this list is organized in order of what I feel most qualified to talk about. And I didn't 100% Celeste last year, but I did 100% the second best game that I played last year. A Hat in Time. Quite frankly, if this list was organized by quality, Celeste would be #1, but A Hat in Time would be an incredibly close #2. It's not nearly as polished as Celeste, and it doesn't have quite the same focus or quantity of content. Celeste is interested in a handful of core gameplay ideas, and it stays focused on those throughout a number of extremely lengthy levels and a ton of bonus content. A Hat in Time has lots of different ideas, and it wants to give equal attention to all of them, and ultimately winds up spreading itself a little bit thin. But what is here is so right up my alley that I can't help but love it. I can't help but gush about this game. It's everything that I love Mario games for, but have resigned myself to never find there again. It's got the personality of the first two Paper Mario games, especially The Thousand Year Door, but backed up by the platforming styles of 64 and Sunshine. It's easy to forget, sitting pretty as we are in a post-Nintendo Switch world, but that was a style we'd all basically thought was extinct until Odyssey stumbled out of the caves, blinking in the cold light of day, naked Mario's nipples on display for the whole internet to see. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Hat in Time. We're far enough in the future now for people to be making nostalgia tribute games for the GameCube and PS2 era, and that's essentially what a Hat in Time is. I don't think of myself as a particularly nostalgic person, and I wouldn't say that I ever felt nostalgic while playing this game, but I can definitely say that this game reminded me of a lot of the things that I enjoyed about video games in the early to mid-2000s that I haven't really seen in video games for a while, just beefed up with some more modern design conventions. It's really hard to pin down the tone of this game because it's definitely something that a kid could play and enjoy aside from that one level, and it's not at any point making fun of or ashamed of its unabashed video gaminess or its childish protagonist and the absurd premise. But it also has some bite to it. It doesn't really talk down to the audience. Despite the bright, colorful appearance and its breezy, easygoing, down-for-whatever plot, Hat Kid finds herself in a hostile world. She's on a solo mission to retrieve the power supply she needs to return home, and pretty much everyone that she encounters can at least be vaguely categorized as a villain. Which is kind of a key component of a lot of classic stories with young protagonists, a child character thrust out into a world of adults who all exist somewhere on a spectrum between disregarding the protagonist or desiring to use the protagonist for their own purposes. Yet somehow, through all of this, Hat Kid still tries her best to befriend everyone that she meets along the way. Even the demon that steals her soul, because that happens. And you know what? Life is tough. Life is full of challenges and forces of antagonism. We all feel completely over it sometimes. If you read Hat Kid's journals, she clearly isn't a fan of all of these selfish adults and all of the monsters who are out to get her either. But Hat Kid plugs along anyway, in the spirit of kindness and friendship and all with a smile on her face. And in the end, maybe it's worth it because she might have just left this planet a little bit better than when she found it. Anyway, yeah, I guess that's it. The almost 10 games that I played in 2018. Maybe in 2019 I'll actually play 10 games. Maybe I'll even play more than 10 games so I can actually rank them by quality. Then there'd be a super exciting race to see who can come in third behind Persona 5 and Persona 5R.